If Indian businesses are being toasted for their successes, it is also because of the surrounding politico-economic ecosystem that is fueling this growth. It is now a real honor for me to welcome on stage three union ministers, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, and Mr. Piyush Goyal, who will be joining us as soon as he comes to this hall. Their contribution to nation building is there for all to see. Now, if many of us have felt over the last few years particularly that governance has become more technology-enabled and public services have become more easily accessible, a significant part of that credit goes to Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, the Minister for Law and Justice and Information Technology, who has shepherded the Digital India program. As the Law Minister, he has piloted several landmark initiatives, and that includes a move to draft a comprehensive privacy law, as well as the bill to ban the practice of triple talaq amongst Muslims. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad. Mr. Suresh Prabhu is the Union Minister for Commerce and Industry and Civil Aviation. He brings a wealth of experience to his current role, having handled several ministries in the past. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Suresh Prabhu. Shireen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Zaka. Well, it's my pleasure now to welcome the two ministers on stage, and shortly we'll be joined by Mr. Piyush Goyal as well. Mr. Prasad, let me start by asking you, sir, and we finished talking about the economic roadmap for 8% plus growth in the previous panel just a few minutes ago. But let me ask you, sir, this is election season, and everyone wants to know what is going to be the big election mantra, what are going to be the big promises that your government will make to ensure that, as Ajay Singh pointed out, it is Fir se ek baar Modi Sarkar.
You see the kind of work we have done in the last 4.5 years plus is by itself a great example as to how we have changed the narrative of India. I was talking about Digital India program. Today, India's digital transformation is happening. And I would like to take this opportunity that Digital India is beyond IT. It is designed to empower ordinary Indians with the power of technology. Low-cost technology. The JAM Trinity we have talked about repeatedly as to how we have saved close to 1 lakh crore plus. The e-governance part, the e-hospital, the e-scholarship, the electronic manufacturing in the mobile sector, all is happening. But the most important point is today India's poor feels empowered. And just now we are talking about this whole Modi Care, the largest healthcare scheme. I have met digital movement as the kind of a mass movement. Common Service Center, you must have heard about.
Right.
From 80,000 we took to 3 lakh plus. They are digital kiosks giving services. They were also involved in registering Indians for this Ayushman Bharat. Out of 2 crore registration, 1.5 crore has been done by them in the last 2 months. So this is a new landscape happening in India of transformation. I'm not talking about other developments we will talk about, but I think the changing narrative which has happened in India, from economic growth to equity to care for the poor, apart from the image of India, surely people will trust us.
So give me some specifics on what you're going to go to the voters with.
I think you have to await the manifesto finalization.
Sneak peek? Sneak peek.
Sneak peek what we have done, we want to carry it forward. Today India is the 6th biggest economy of the world, we'll make it the 5th biggest economy of the world. That's how we'll go. Today India has become the 2nd largest mobile manufacturer in the country, in the world. We'll make it the 1st. Today India is the 2nd biggest startup movement in the world. 8 are unicorns, 1 billion plus, okay? We'll make it the top startup movement in the world. This is how we have to change the narrative. From the farmers, to the poor, to the underprivileged, to the aspirational. That's how we'll do it.
You know, since you talked about technology and you talked about how Digital India is not just about IT, but it's about empowering the citizen, it's also being used as a tool to connect with politicians, and it's also being used as a tool by politicians to engage with the common voter. I want to ask you, about elections in the time of social media. Today, in fact, the Twitter CEO, Jack Dorsey, was summoned by the parliamentary panel. He wasn't there. There was a representative from Twitter there, but you've been talking to Twitter, Facebook, and so on and so forth on how they can sort of ensure that we have clean elections. What is the conversation at this point in time leading to, and how is the government engaging with them?
I can only give you the general ideas because as far as Twitter's appearance before the parliamentary committee is concerned, that is their domain. I have said very clearly, all the social media platforms are welcome to do business in India because India offers a big digital commercial opportunity also. Facebook has the biggest presence, so has WhatsApp, Twitter's the second and third. But I have said very clearly, India appreciates, acknowledges and respects freedom of ideas on social media. But any abuse of data of Indians to influence the election will not be acceptable. Mark Zuckerberg apologized. Cambridge Analytica issued a notice. They did not respond properly. The matter I have referred to the CBI. Okay? So we have been very tough. And thirdly, most important, any kind of data imperialism will not be acceptable by any company. We believe in equality. We believe India's sovereignty also. If you go like that, surely a proper norm will come. An election commission is equally aware of that. And in no manner whatsoever, the data of Indians shall be allowed to be abused to influence elections.
Since you talked about data, sir, and one of the pending issues that this government has not been able to take forward in this tenure, I would imagine if you do return to power, that will be given priority if I hear what you're saying today. Data localization and a larger data privacy and data protection bill. Disappointed that you couldn't do it in this tenure?
First of all, if we return to power, remove the if first. Okay?
That's for you to say. I can't make those assertions. Not my place to make those assertions at all. You're free to remove it.
And I must clarify, it is no arrogance. With the utmost humility, the kind of work we have done, people will bless us. Now, data protection law. Sri Krishna committee was there, you know it.
Yeah.
His report came. We had 4 or 5 rounds of consultations. Consultation with the state governments, their reports, the ministries. All the consultations are complete. One final, I would say, nut and bolts are to be tightened, and then we'll go to the cabinet. Now, the whole world is awaiting India's data protection law, and what we have said, we have come with the idea of a data fiduciary. What is that? You deal with data, but act as a trustee. That is very important. Now, electronic policy we have come about. $1 trillion economy of India to make Indian economy $1 trillion we have come about. So much of work has been done. So I think a little word of appreciation from Shireen Bhan would be okay. Huh?
We do that every day.
And I hope you remember that. When we had come to power, India had only 2 mobile factories.
And
now we have 127. And with components,
and
it is 261.
We've done several interviews with you about that as well. But you know, I want to go back to the comment that you made, that there's no question of if you will return to power. And you also then qualified to say that that is not arrogance, but there's confidence in that statement. You know, the conversations that are happening between various political parties, the combinations that are being worked out. I know that the BJP believes that Mahamilawat is not the way to go for India, but what gives you the confidence that you'll be able to replicate the arithmetic that you garnered for yourself in 2014, given the combinations that you're up against?
3 clear reasons. India of 2019 is not the India of 90s, where you have Prime Minister for 1 week to 40 days to 10 months to 8 months. I will not take names. It is a confident India, aspirational India. And handling the IT portfolio, Shireen, let me tell you, no power on earth can stop India from becoming a global power, powered by the aspiration of young Indians. The second, Indians want a leader who can take decisions. And as our Prime Minister rightly said, if I am heard globally, if India's global stature has risen, people around the globe also take cognizance of the fact that I'm a Prime Minister who has a legitimate mandate. The mandate is very important. Now, who is the Prime Minister candidate? Let me ask you a question. Is it Mamta ji? Is it Mayawati ji? Is it Akhilesh ji? Is it Sharad Pawar ji? Who are there?
I
Therefore,
have no answer to that question, sir, because
because
I'm not
because
involved with those negotiations.
If I don't talk about the Milawat part, you have a combination which is leaderless, rudderless, programless. And India on the rising mood. There's a mismatch. And the people of India, third point I'm going to tell you, people of India know whom to vote for the municipality, whom to vote for the Gram Panchayat, whom to vote for the state, and whom to vote to run India.
So you're saying that don't make too much of what happened in the assembly elections. Don't extrapolate that to mean that 2019 is going to be a difficult year for you.
No, I can tell you, I should be very honest, we lost Chhattisgarh. But we did not lose Madhya Pradesh, okay, the kind of vote, 10, 15 seats we lost very marginally in spite of 15 years good governance.
But you lost, sir. I mean, a loss is a loss.
We did not form the government, but the defeat conclusively was in Chhattisgarh. But when you take to the Lok Sabha elections, the people of India know whom to vote and what country expects. And you know, the most important thing is the kind of work Modi ji has done. I will tell you, Shireen, go to the villages.
I just returned
I know you have a powerful presence in Mumbai and Delhi.
I just returned from Bijnor actually, and I was shooting around there.
I have seen you go beyond Bijnor.
Okay, all right.
Go to Bihar, go to UP villages, go to Madhya Pradesh, and go to. I was just.
We do that.
I had gone to Vellore and Madurai. Let me tell you, the great change happening in India, the aspirational India, even young boys, girls, women, is something to be appreciated.
Absolutely. Let me also at this point welcome Honorable Minister Mr. Piyush Goyal. Thank you, sir, for joining us here this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. Mr. Prabhu, let me come to you now, sir. Mr. Prasad, absolutely confident that the government will return to a second tenure. But let me ask you in terms of the economic roadmap.
I don't think he's not in doubt also.
No, I would imagine he's not in doubt. There should be.
You're not in doubt, I suppose?
Ravi ji, Shireen is worried about herself.
Why should I be worried? I have no idea why you say that I should be worried. I have nothing to do with either anyone who comes to office or we do our job.
I hope so.
We do our job, sir. We do our job. Mr. Prabhu, thank you very much. We do our job. Mr. Prabhu, let me ask you, sir. You know, just before your panel started, we were talking about the export aspirations for India. And especially as you look forward, you have announced an agri-export policy. You're talking about announcing various other measures as well. How will you ensure that we move up this 1.5–2% share of world trade that we currently enjoy? What is it going to take India beyond that?
You know, firstly, we are already moving up. As you can see, our agriculture export, which is just about $30 billion, we want to take it to $100 billion. So because you mentioned agriculture exports. But generally, this is an unprecedented time for the global trade. No one has ever faced such a challenge to global trade, ever. So despite that, our exports are growing. In fact, this year, our exports will be growing at the highest rate. We'll be registering the highest number of exports ever in this year, including service and merchandise will definitely exceed $500 billion. So in addition to that, we are now working on a strategy as to how can we actually get new markets and new products. See, you cannot get new markets unless you re-strategize yourself and find out in those markets which are the products which will sell. So unless you actually have this matrix of product and market put together, you are not going to succeed. So we are working on that. While we do this, as I said, agriculture was never thought to be an exportable item. Because we always looked at it from a domestic perspective. But the first time we are actually not only made a policy, it is under implementation. Within a week of the policy being approved by the cabinet, we are involved, all the state governments are working on it to supplement it and to support it. There is an air cargo policy, which we announced on the 15th of January. So because particularly the agriculture products, because perishable in nature, particularly vegetables and fruits, which you lose about 30% of them before it reaches the marketplace, all those products will have to be airlifted. So that again is being made. Also, we need to have a different kind of strategy to enter markets of different kinds. So actually tomorrow, I'm meeting all the Latin Americans. On the 16th and 17th of March, we are meeting all the Africans. So this is, we just met only 3 days back, all the ASEAN ministers from 10 of them. Then of course we keep doing that. So idea is, how do you ensure that we work with them? And then of course we are working with all export promotion councils who are the ones who actually will export. Because government can only facilitate it. Then we revamped the Exim Bank regime so that they recapitalize, so they will be able to now get more money And then again, the systems which actually allowed the money to flow from the Exim Bank to the
Yeah.
foreign markets, that again has been completely relooked to.
If I may ask you a quick follow-up before I get to Mr. Goel.
I also want to add to what
I'll
you
I'll
said.
get to that, sir.
Just to what you
I'll get you to respond to that. But very quickly, sir, something that you and I have had many conversations about, our tryst with the new industrial policy, and this was supposed to be the new industrial policy after almost the early 90s that was going to be put in place.
one?
The new industrial policy that you've been working
new
on.
industri-
Is it going to happen this term or next term?
One is the new industrial policy is already approved, waiting only cabinet approval, because we had worked out a complete detailed action plan as well along with the policy.
Yeah.
So it has already been ready, it is waiting for the cabinet. Now it's a matter of time, because when we do it now or we do it after the election, as you are saying, in our same government, we like to do it after
Same
the election.
government, so it'll get-
basically, but a process is very clear. In this new industrial policy, whatever elements you have put in,
Yeah.
they are already under implementation. For example, removing regulation.
Yes.
This is one of the key components of industrial policy. Because industrialization can happen only when government withdraws and do not try to create any impediments in the way of industrialization happening. So that is already in works and that is already taking place. Secondly, industrial corridors, which we want to make sure that
Right.
industrial corridors will happen in a way, and now we are at a new dimension, that some of the nodes of this industrial corridor will have country-specific location. We offered it to Russia, we offered it to Korea, and in fact, the Korean minister was here, Minister Kim, who is actually looking at it, and they will themselves plan it. We are also offering like that to specific countries. So the idea is that industrial policy, which is actually aiming at increasing the share of manufacturing. Incidentally, we already created a map. In this $5 trillion,
Right.
20% of GDP, moving up from 16%, will come from industry.
Yeah.
So the industry itself is going to contribute significantly more, and that to the today $2.6 trillion.
But now we'll
it
have
is
to
only
wait.
16%.
We'll have to wait till after
So
the
you
elections.
can imagine how much more in absolute number
Yeah.
the contribution of the industry will be making to India's leading GDP growth. So actually, this is something which is already under work. So all of these elements, key elements of the industrial
Are
policy,
there.
are already under work.
Okay.
I just want to add one
Yes.
thing, which really goes to the credit of Suresh ji. For the first time in India, logistics has been understood to be an important element of our export competitiveness,
Yes.
as well as the cost of operations in the country for businesses. He has brought out a very robust framework in which different ministries are working under him to work out how we can bring down the logistics costs, which is currently considered to be quite high when we look at international standards, and bring it to the 8% or so, which is a reasonable benchmark. And for that, while he was the railway minister, he had started a process which we have continued. You are well aware we've stopped the railway budget and wanted to get politics out of railways and
Yes.
do railway planning based on economic considerations.
Yes.
Thanks to the initiatives that he had started, today the railways has a very clear perspective plan in hand of 23,000 kilometers of doubling, quadrupling, tripling, whatever else, certain new connections to be made to the ports,
Sure.
to emerging ports, to add capacity to ports, movement of containers.
Yeah.
We prepared the entire perspective plan. 2 more dedicated freight corridors, which in the long run need to be brought in.
Yeah.
The earlier 2 he had expedited and now are taking shape, will be over by end of next year. All of this will increase the modal share of railways to about 45 to 50%. Otherwise, if it was business as usual, from its current 30%, it would have fallen to. It'll unclog the roads, make it more viable, cost efficient. And I believe that the way forward, both it will impact the railways becoming a more profitable organization
Yeah.
and bring down logistics to less than 8%.
Yes.
Shirin, this is an important point when I was telling you about, and what Piyush just mentioned. Just imagine what is lacking in India. Entrepreneurship, any Indian living, India going out, succeeding. In India, despite several challenges in the past 60s, 70s, 80s, we could actually contribute so much to the industrialization,
Yes.
6th, 7th largest industrialized country in the world. What was lacking, what he mentioned, is a logistic issue. We have infrastructure, but not logistic. Now making sure, so we are creating integrated logistic strategy
Right.
and actually implementing and rolling out the plan as we go along.
Yes.
What is the result of this? If the logistic cost goes down, And the turnaround time, the logistics speed goes up.
Yes.
And
Big
the-
win for
I told about
competitiveness.
deregulation.
Yes.
As we keep doing that, the entrepreneurship in India is already there.
Absolutely.
A good example is aviation.
Yeah.
We removed as much roadblock as possible. Now we are coming out with a completely 2040 vision for aviation.
Yeah.
So there is a complete clarity as to where we'll go. So once all of this happens,
Yeah.
I will not be surprised. We'll definitely be the third largest economy. It's a matter of time whether
Absolutely.
in 7, 20, 15 years,
Sure.
that's what we are trying to work on.
Sure.
And with leadership of Prime Minister Modi ji, we'll reach there sooner than later.
Okay.
Because leadership does matter. It's in the case of Singapore. Why it became such a great country. The
Yes.
city becomes a country because of leadership.
So-
So leadership would matter.
Okay, let me ask the three of you, and Mr. Goyal, if I could use a cricketing analogy, because you're somewhat of an all-rounder in this government, from coal ministry to railway ministry, finance ministry. So let me ask you this, and I'll ask you this in the context because the three of you have made it very clear that you're coming back to power. So if I could focus a little bit on the unfinished agenda. When you came to office in 2014, the promise was maximum governance, minimum government. The assumption was that that would actually mean that you would cut down the size of government. Why do you actually need coal ministry and mines ministry? Why do you need a separate MNRE ministry? That was the assumption. Is that now going to be something that you will consider actually doing if you were to return to power?
First of all, when you talk of all-rounders, as I was walking and I was complaining that I didn't know there are going to be 3 ministers, then I would never have come, because in this government, each minister is capable of handling the entire government and responding about the entire government. So you really didn't need 3 ministers here. Point 1. Point 2, press makes its own assumptions. I don't think very often those assumptions necessarily are right. When we talk of minimum government and maximum governance, it's about governance practices. It's about transparency. It's about taking issues to its logical end in a time-bound manner. You heard the Prime Minister talk of the ABC philosophy. Now, your limited focus, so it's very easy. We can merge coal and mines tomorrow. Like that, we can merge 10 other ministries. That's not a big deal. But you will feel satisfied. Oh, that's great reform. In fact, that's the myopic view that some people have. That, oh, if the ministries get merged, it's great reform. If a certain action is taken, it's great reform.
No, but why is the merger of public sector entities great reform and not the merger of government ministries?
It's a case-by-case thing. When 2 companies are doing marketing of the same product, and if they are being merged or a value chain is being created from the production phase to the marketing phase, it's a case-by-case situation. There's no one-size-fits-all. Otherwise, probably CNBC should now consider TV18. That why have so many anchors? Why do they need to have so many people? After all, the TV runs only once at a time. You can have one anchor from morning to evening.
Employment. I thought you wanted to create employment. I thought the government wanted to create employment, not to put people out of work.
I didn't know Mr. Mukesh Ambani is so दानवीर बन गए कि अभी employment create करने के लिए अपनी profitability को affect कर रहे हैं. So I think there's no one size fits all. The situation has to be seen in perspective. If we didn't have an MNRE ministry, you think we could have given the kind of thrust and focus that today renewables has? We have become the world's renewable capital today in India.
Right.
Coal is an issue which affects the availability of power in this country. We are proud to say within 1 year of this government, we were able to make India self-sufficient to the extent possible in coal and power surplus.
Sure.
Now, all of these things need focus attention. And I think there is no such rule that when you talk of minimum government, it's just cutting down departments. It would only mean an optical illusion.
Okay,
I believe outcomes matter more
Okay.
than the
Fair point.
departments.
Let me ask you, and then I'll ask Mr. Prasad as well, because he's been involved with looking at this issue in his former avatar with MTNL and BSNL. So I'll put that question to you as well. Strategic disinvestment, again, was something that the government had talked about. If you were to return to power, is this something that do you believe that this will be part of the unfinished agenda that will be taken forward? Because this is your stated objective. You, in fact, got cabinet approval to go ahead with strategic disinvestment for more than a dozen odd companies.
First of all, let me put it in a larger perspective. How we jumped 30 points in ease of doing business in such a short time. How is that IMF and the World Bank have said India is the fastest growing economy? How is it that we left France over to become the sixth biggest economy of the world, likely to even leave England behind. It is a collective effort of reform, of good governance, of delivery. That is very important. If you ask my view, coal and mines need to be focused separately. As Piyush rightly pointed out, MSME, we focus separately and see the results as to how the small industry are doing. The way we focus on IT. I did not know much about IT till I became the minister. Now India is acknowledged digital power. Now, coming to the larger narrative, don't confine telecommunication only to BSNL, MTNL.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying strategic disinvestment. Yeah.
But I think the return which the government of Mr. Modi has got on disinvestment, I think is the highest amount ever. But let me tell you, have we permitted a fair competition in the telecommunication or not? More players have come or not? We have also been very fair in spectrum allocations. All the previous kind of clouds are no more there. So I think you have to take the whole thing in a totality. And the biggest focus of our government, which I would like to highlight in this August gathering, is a good blend of growth and equity. There has always been a big debate. We came with GST, tax reform. Today, income tax returns have risen. Returns in the GST have risen. The government has more money in its kitty. We are doing it for the poor, underprivileged, and also for infrastructure. Digital power, other sector, Swachh Bharat, Shauchalayas. Therefore, this fine blend of growth and equity is truly a remarkable achievement of our government.
Okay, let me get...
I need to put one more thing in perspective.
Yes.
Your channel particularly,
Yes.
I mean, I'm not come here to have a ranking match with you.
It looks like
But
that.
your channel particularly
Yes.
has a favorite subject that you talk about and you propagate. Some people who also talk a lot about it is privatization of our public sector banks. In this room, we have a lot of people who come from industry. I dare say each one of them today is where he is because of our public sector banks. I am where I am today here because of our public sector banks. They have helped Indian industries survive, grow, nurtured them. If anybody has a problem, and everybody has a problem in life, at that point of time, the private sector just scoots and runs away. It's our public sector banks that hold our hand and help nurture a person through the life cycle of business. Point one. Point two, private sector has not covered itself with glory with their banking practices. So it's not that the panacea of all problems is you privatize everything. We have enough problems in the private sector which are now coming home to roost. So clearly privatization is not the solution necessarily. I think you have to realize it's not ownership which defines success or failure.
Sure.
It's vision and leadership. And that this government has given a plenty to all our
So can I get 10 seconds from each of you before we close the session, sir? And Mr. Goyal, I'll start by asking you the top 3 things that you will focus on in terms of reform if you were to return to power.
Well, as Raviji rightly said, reform in the perspective of a business channel or a pink paper is not necessarily the reform this government looks at. For me, giving electricity to the poor child at the remotest village is the biggest reform I could do. For Pradhan Mantri ji's Swachh Bharat and toilets for our mothers and sisters who could not use the toilet between sunrise and sunset is the biggest reform. That path will continue. We want more benefits to reach the weaker sections of society. Second very major agenda of any ministry in this government will continue to be a deep thrust on honesty and integrity, which we have taken to the highest level. We have to change the way the rules of the game. Before this government came in and illustrious leaders ran governments for many years, but we never got the tag of an honest economy anywhere in the world. So I think that is going to, integrity of government is an important issue for us.
Right.
And third and most important, I think, is giving a strong, stable government to the country, a decisive government which can lead from the front and will never have to come to the people of India and say, what can I do? Such a big scam happened, 2 lakh crores in one, 1,86,000 crores in another. But these are the compulsions of coalition politics.
Okay.
I would hate to have a prime minister in this country anymore, once more, who has to say, but these are compulsions of coalition politics. that a media anchor will decide who will become a minister and which department will be given to that person.
Well, we have no such power, I can assure you that. But that is the perfect note to thank each of our panelists, because I think Mr. Goel has set up this discussion for our next guest who joins us here. But my many thanks to Mr. Prasad, Mr. Prabhu and Mr. Goel for joining us here and taking us through what the vision will be as you move closer to the elections. And thank you once again, sir, for joining us here this evening.
Can we have a round of applause for Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, Mr.